All right, it's that time to practice restorative. So what we're going to begin with is opening the circulation and the flow into the lungs. So we're going to reverse kind of the gravitational pull. You know how we do that with our inversions with our legs lifted, but this kind of releases the gravitational pull on the abdominal organs in the legs. So you're sitting, I would say, at the very edge of the short end of your bolster. So I'm a little bit back from that, but anybody that has length to them will need to be at the edge. I think it's always best. You can always slide farther back. Once you put the possibility of a belt around the legs, buckle up into holding and sealing off so the legs are a little closer in than hips distance. Go ahead and lower your head back. You might have a very flat blanket for cushion. The ribs are quite expansive in this moment. So if that experience of lift and external sensation in the rib cage is fulfilled, you might need to have your feet on the ground for a few more moments while you get that breath into the upper lobes of the lungs. So you feel like you're breathing higher up in the body versus down in the belly. And then you let the legs stretch down on top of that rolled up blanket. Now I have to kind of fuss my blanket a little bit downwards. So I feel it right under the ridge of my, a tiny bit above my ankles. Some of you might go, no, I really like it right at the ankle connected to the heel. So let's let everybody decide how they're going to position their blanket underneath. And so the feet they kind of fling a little forward. They're relaxing. The ankles are cozy. And then we add on a sandbag. It's a little bit of an intense lift for the ribs and the core, but it certainly releases that gravitational pull. So the sand is on the front of the hips, and it could be a little lower. You might get the sides of the sandbag and kind of pull it across, and then feel via moving it till it's adjusting. And then your feet might start to rotate out a little more. So your work is on maybe pushing your feet a little bit wider so the belt is really holding that connector through the legs. But keep in mind, we're trying to release the gravitational downward pull on the legs because we're not standing into them. So open the chest, spread out the arms so the shoulders are moving back. And as your eyes center in, feel where the attention starts to kind of creep up the front of the body towards the chest and centering through the throat. And gather your attention on the even rhythm of the breath. And you're still sorting out the body, right? Even though the breath is an essential focus, so where we attend our mind to greatly affects the moment. But of course, you might be moving your feet. You might be feeling how the shoulders motion affects your ribs lifting with the breath. So let's just kind of drop into this first pose. It's a bridge pose. We do many kinds of bridge poses, like we do many kinds of twists. Right? There's varieties for opening up the chest and the heart and oxygenating a little deeper into the lungs. See if you can rest your abdomen. It's already fully lengthening simply by the design. Just giving the legs permission to release. Adjusting is always fine if you need to move the sand a little bit lower, maybe higher. And just feel how you sort out the support that's even under you, not just on top, but how the shoulders press back. Or maybe they don't. So inhaling, count of 4. Empty the lungs. So this is similar to any way we start. Their poses change, but we keep the exact focus on the in-breath through the out-breath. And now we're going to shift the props. So what we'll do is maintain this little bit of lift up, right? Even though the lift might feel like it's from the back of your ribs, it kind of surges the rib cage. The pelvis is lifted, right? It's a mild inversion. Your head is at the base. So it seems reasonable we move our sandbag so we can actually move our feet. And we slide the feet off of the blanket and then just walk the feet in towards you. You might use that belt for a moment, feeling its restriction. You're trying to push out and resist. This is a good exercise in general. And when you get a feeling of that resistance, can you kind of morph into somewhere in between pushing and forcing and then centering so your lower back can relax. And then unbuckle. And if the legs swing out suddenly, just keep it in control. And if you can bring your feet into Baddha Konasana, give it a try. So feet together, knees out. The bolster might work for you. If you're barely able to touch the bolster, slide a little bit back. So you'll feel now the back of the shoulders on the floor and the knees out and the feet on the bolster. Of course, this would be easier if I had my belt hooked under my feet and I could hold it, which is taught as well. Right? So if you decide you want to get a little bit challenged with that, you could try that. But I'm finding that this is simply okay. I can use the effort of my hips. And that definitely congeals the hips together and collaborates both adductors. They definitely have they're doing a plus sign, right? They're adding together right now, right and left. Take a moment just to bring the positional balance on the bolster different. So you'll lift up the knees and the feet will step down off the bolster. And as you push your awareness down to your feet, feel a lift from the pushing of the feet down, a lifting of the front of the hips. And then I want you to reach your hand under to the bolster. Both hands might be helpful. And turn the bolster so it now is across your mat horizontal. And you might need to slide down a little bit so that your pelvis, meaning towards your feet, your pelvis is now completely wide on the bolster, right? It's not just almost most of it, but now it's all of it. And if you reach down to where your rear area is, it should feel like it's almost on the other side of the bolster. So you're positioned in support of a lift. Okay, so let's get our belt. And as you get the belt set up, what we're going to do is take a loop, so buckle up, and bring the right knee in and feel, without holding onto it, the energy of the left foot making like an imprint into your mat. So it's not a like pushing away, it's imprinting down. I find that to be a little challenging. The tendency could be pushing for you and like the sliding the foot down. But I want you to try to orient your proprioception mostly that you're pushing the left foot down. So the hip wakes up. This whole left hip is now getting pretty toned and maybe a little tired. Okay, with that right knee in, get the belt and a big enough loop. gotta be big. So as you get that right foot connected to the belt, might as well start really generous so that you can always make it smaller because you don't want to feel stuck in a short belt. Okay, so we got a loop and now we got a sandbag and my loop is just under my foot and it's dangling. I'm gonna get my sand to the left thigh. And we're gonna stretch that left leg down. I was surprised by my blanket there, but yeah, that'll be nice to have. I was going to switch it around so you just have variety. Now edge yourself so that you can really feel where the pelvis is on that bolster. You might use your elbows to push into the bolster on the side where your ribs are, unless you somehow have arms that go to the other side. But as you reach that right foot, hold on to the belt and then see if you can get that belt just the right amount of width with the loop behind your head and still have your head noticing that it moves back. So fuss around with how your belt is on your head, right? So it is around the brain. It's not on the brain stem. It's in the middle, in the shelf. And when you feel that is the accurate way to balance your head into the belt, you want to maybe let your head do a little bit of shifting side to side until you orient the sensation of your traction for your neck. So this doesn't mean I'm pushing my chin forward. It means that I'm letting my head lean back into the belt. It might look a little bit of a forward tilt with the neck, but let your mind focal point be to lean back your head and let that sand be an essential part of grounding a pose on the top of the left thigh. Good. The arms open out, they go out to, simply a T shape. Probably cactus might cause a little bit of challenge in the shoulder, in the ribs. So if it's T or if it's a little bit downwards, just besides the bolster, might feel serene as well. Okay, so let's try this. So we've got a brain float pose. The leg is up, the belt is hooked from the foot to the back of your head. And with that left leg, maybe pivoting at the foot a little bit out, feel the source of awareness through the breath in and exhaling, letting gravity kind of assist the exhalation. And you may feel sensations that were different than a few minutes ago. You may notice there's a little gripping patterns in the back of the right leg that are disturbing, right? So if it's feeling like you're kind of holding on, can't quite get the fullness of the stretch, then you might let your head lean back a little more. You might let it go back so far, even to make the blanket under your head. So you have this kind of illusion that it's supporting you, but there is still traction from the belt. That might be more comforting for some of us. And then that belt, though, is still driving the force through the connective tissue at the back body from the heel through the sitting bone. So just isolate that. If the leg is bending, that's fine. But we are working towards extending. So think about when we do breath extensions, right? It usually means a little bit of an arch through the breath, through the spine. Maybe that works good for the leg too. So a few more moments on this side. And you're doing any subtle work with how the hips are presented. If one seems like it's hiked higher than the other. Work to balancing the hips. Now with this awareness on side one, and you're going to unravel the emphasis on the hamstring, right, on one side, and give this right side what the left side is receiving. So when we move, I would just pull the sandbag up to your belly. So you're still working with that. I don't think of belly balance as being an idea, but maybe that's a new concept, belly balancing. Okay, so hands to the back of your head. This is really an elementary approach, but it's nice to do simples. And bring the left foot up and the right leg down. And oh, it's a second side, so it's not always exactly the same feeling and sensation that's on board. It could be other areas of that upper leg if it feels like a stark difference and it's just tense in the back of the leg. Then you might loosen up the belt. You know, I feel a little difference from one side to the next. It's subtle, but it needs to be attended to. It's very subtle, but don't overdo it so the leg is shaking. And then let the right leg have that sand on the top of the thigh. So it faces straight down, lengthening it down on the top of that right thigh. With that awareness through the center body, your arms, wherever they're comfortable. Second side might be different than first side. Just arriving and, you know, feeling the flipped upside down feeling. Something's lifted up, something's anchoring you. You know, this side could make a difference with how your neck feels in the belt. Maybe there's a flexibility orientation on the second side that you're surprised how your head lifts easier, or maybe it goes farther back. Oh, this is a practice of getting to know yourself. And I would be curious that we're doing a decent amount of mild inversions, that when we get to the end, some of you that feel that legs up and that is difficult, I wonder if it would change since we're doing this build-up. Just kind of curious. We'll find out on the other side. We don't have to make a big change, but it's probably on the horizon. So we have the thigh lengthening, both of them, right? One is the front, one is the back. We're doing a little bit of leg overhaul today. That's kind of what's up. You got to step into them all the time. It's some nice length. Okay, now this is a little difficult to even see, right? This kind of description, it's not going to be identified right through watching, but I want you to get a sense of where the waist is relaxing with the breath, feeling that movement, and then be very conscious of your head moving back. So we really don't want to strengthen the neck pieces that push your head forward and down. We want to work on that strength into the neck. Still needs some toning work, right, in the direction of reaching back. And let's let the head go. So I'm going to let my blanket be a little bit higher than it was in the beginning with the bridge pose. That was pretty flat. I'm going to roll it up so it's a quarter fold. And I'm going to put it right at the connection where my shoulders are. Okay, so my head just barely fits on. Hands hold the belt, slide it off your head, let your head relax back. Now, if you feel your head nod a little side to side, and it feels like, oh, that's too high, then you lower it. And I wouldn't go any higher though. Okay, so, and if it's difficult, it's these, you know, the scalings. There might be some areas here that we can do some gentle head turning and release. So hold on to the belt, slide the sandbag off of that right leg. Okay. And then hold the belt with your right hand and feel that left hand to the top of the left thigh. And there certainly is a perfect place for your webbing of your thumb and index finger there. And as you cross the left leg to the right, feel your head roll to the left, and the upper leg, right, could feel some intensity. It's nice to be able to experience this and really feel the sequence of movement. So when that hip is reaching, I don't know if you think of it as your hip reaching, I know that it's my leg going to the right, but it is the hip trying to reach out of its stuck self. Hips and pelvis, that's a pretty, a lot of barriers in that area. Not a lot of free range. So doing postures or stretching helps it get some free range. Okay, now the left arm probably should go out. And I'm turning my head the wrong way, so I want to turn it to the left. So feel your head turn. If it's tough to get your neck to rotate, don't force it. You can have your head centered towards the ceiling or turns to the left. Let that right leg just relax down. Maybe it's on the blanket under the lower leg, or you can push it so it is. Now feel that motion of breathing. And the leg, we're going to give it some range of motion coming up here of movement. Okay, so what I want you to work towards is simply bending the left knee. It may be predicted, but instead we're going to come back in center and we're going to take the belt off that left foot. You can't forget the right foot too, so don't let me forget that. You're going to take a, if you got a ball, take a ball. If you got only a block, use the block. Bring the knees up, both next to each other, still on the bolster. The ball between the knees, right center. It's pretty much an easily supported space. And then bring the knees back to the right. Okay, now this is a lower twist, right? It's lower body, lower bones. So they go back to the right. You just did that leg reaching over to the right side. So it's similar warmed in that part of your back to do that. Now, when maybe your head rolls a little to the left, maybe you tilt your head downwards, which is usually what our go-to is to make it easier, but still that's rounding. So trying to keep open. Admittedly, it's a tiny bit challenging to not let the head chin tuck down. Try and keep it up. Okay, don't be shy. All right, now bring the knees. Now this is to go so slow. So get your slow-mo meter going here. Okay, you're already there, right? You started your class, so you're in a little bit more slowdom. Now squeeze the ball, right? So you recruit all the way up in towards the core body. Feels a little bit of awareness kind of tangling up in there. So squeeze and then be very careful of the low back. So when I bring the knees back center, I turn my head. So everything goes back into the center spine. And then I want you to bring the knees now to the left, like you might predict. And you're going to be a little free with this, just going side to side, kind of windshield wipering the connection. Find the mildest amount of squeezing of the ball so that you feel like you're just lightly recruiting your core. It's not overdoing it. I don't want you to tax the middle of the body, but feel that you might go faster, perhaps. You want to swish side to side. You might notice the left side of the back from the SI joint might feel a little bit more open since we did work with that leg primarily so far. Be subtle. It's most likely true though. Some like a little centimeter more of space. Okay, now go side to side with a little bit of speed if you haven't tried. So really warming up that back. The back, all it knows is that you're moving briskly, but you're going side to side. It usually doesn't move this way with the knees, right? Most of the time the knees are going forward when you're moving, unless you tend to do this often. Okay. Now, next time you go back in towards the center, okay, lower your feet down, still with the ball. Okay, so push into the ball. If you feel like you're going to lose it, then you might have to reset it, center of the knees. But squeeze into it, squeeze, squeeze, and then feel the tailbone on that bolster, so that's a little bit of scooping under, and that means it's more of a cat-shaped spine or C. So you're going to press down to the tailbone, and then arms are open, bring your knees in towards your chest. Okay, so try that movement one more time and be sincere about the option. Maybe you're not sure if it's for you, but when you lower down your feet with the ball between the knees, toe, ball, heel. Sounds like you should have the ball under your feet. No, toe, ball, heel. And then as you lift up, can you work with squeezing the ball, initiating that, and then the knees in versus pushing into your feet and squeezing into the ball. I want you to squeeze into the ball. The feet are going to be there regardless, right? They're not suddenly going to evaporate. And then you're going to bring the knees in towards the chest. I'm just trying to find some really good core correspondence work, right, with the mid body in our movements. Okay. So now as you come back to center, remove the ball and get a belt and place it underneath your right foot. And it doesn't have to stay in that buckled up loop. It's not required. Left leg down. And then we'll go right into the second side. Reach up with your left hand to the belt. Turn your head to the right as your right arm opens out. And cross the right leg over to the left. And feel the movement. And try to keep that left side of your back pasted to that bolster. It's not going anywhere, but that right hip is very activated into the glute. Push into the belt. Feel what that's like when you're pushing across to the left side. If the head turns to the right, you feel the end range of the neck. You can then use that hold on the belt to stretch your neck, right? So if my head turns right, and then I pull on the belt, and then I push my foot downwards over to the left side, I can feel the connection into my neck. Okay. Now bend through that right knee. Come back into center. I want to keep it very simple. So take the belt off and then bring your ball between the knees. Knees go to the left. Okay. So another way to work with this would be to straighten out the top leg when you do that leg hip crossover with the belt. And then you use an item, ball or block between the knees and cross to the same direction. You just did it with the belt. You could straighten the right leg. I see this taught often, but I'm just going to stay with the simple variation that I know is fine with my sacrum area instead of kind of pushing out of it. But it's up to you. And if you feel like you're floundering, you're going to fall off your bolster, well then get a block and put it next to the left leg, and maybe that'll kind of hold it up for you a little bit. So that could stay there to help you out if you're shaking and you have your brain turn to the right. Feel that openness. It's quite the isometric exercise for the core. And I'm assuming there's some efforts with breathing slow. Maybe. And the awareness of the waist is to lengthen. Right. Standing on the feet isn't necessarily a time when you feel you lengthen your mid body, even though it could be. but our spine's movement tends to have that downward pull in our belly, and our organs kind of drag down. So until we can get a nice presence in that shape, this is a good way to work with the mid-body. So just a few more moments here with this leg hip crossover towards the left side. Okay. Now you're moving the knees back center. And when you take that direction into the midline, get a feel here of removing the ball, okay? Taking the belt, and it's buckled up into a loop now. If it isn't, do it again and make that loop really wide. You can always sample the width that you have and then make any changes. But you're going to get a feel for that circulation now that was spinning around the legs. So now I mentioned we're doing a fairly decent leg sequencing in the beginning right now. So the feet are out, and instead of forcing or pushing, see if you can kind of relax into the feet themselves, and that might distribute that reverse flow through the legs, that drainage of the lymph, that gravitational flow back towards the heart. And the thoracic duct, right, which is one of the main lymph collectors. So letting things flush out. Okay, now with the legs in this put position, it is an inverted path. Get a feel that your legs are relaxing up into the belt. They're not kind of crumpling over towards your head, but the legs are lifted. And then when you bend through your knees, you know, all this drain, and it's going towards the waist, right? Think of it as when you're working with lymph drain, right? The lymph nodes, right, are like the trash bins, right? So we're flushing out here. So when you're bending your knees, you want to reach up to the belt and then slide your feet close, bend the knees, take the belt off. Okay. So now we're going to take it, so we're leaning all the way towards the left side. So I want you to tilt your body weight to the left and slide down towards the foot of your mat, towards where your feet are. Come up. So here you are with your bolster now right next to your hip. All the way from back to side. Okay. Take the blanket from the foot and make a little bit of a quarter fold. And then we're going to reach that to the other blanket, stack them up, and then get a ball. Get a sandbag near so it's easy to lift up on, so probably next to your left side. Maybe that isn't easiest, but seems to be. And then we'll use a block perhaps overhead. Some of you do use this for your side sage, which is where we're going. Okay. But consider when you get into the shape, I know it's hard not to have a habit of just leaning in. How you arrange the legs, right? So not all of us are going to find sitting up like this is easy for our knees, but leaning into it's okay. So when you're reaching down your side versus kind of rounding into it, this is one way you can kind of round. I want you to work on kind of like as if you're leaning back. You're almost like doing a back bend. So get that ball to the inner right leg before you get too wild and crazy about it. And then get your sand closed. Okay, now lean down so that you're kind of ruffling the ribs. Rib ruffle. Okay, so I lean into it. The bolster does tend to push up with you, doesn't it? So you gotta have to kind of let the bolster know who's boss here. Get the blanket stacked under your head so it's a good lift for your head. Doesn't mean that if you're on your side, this is important, it doesn't mean that on your side that your neck can't have lift. Probably this is more important if I'm on my side to have the lift of my head And if I'm on my back, because on my back, the cervical spine, right, when it's pushed in, right, it makes that rounded hook at the top. When you're on your side, you're not going to be making that rounded position. It will help your shoulder likely to have enough lift. Add sands, and then come into the shape of reaching your right arm either open or overhead. Okay, so getting the sand support, however it naturally feels helpful for you right now. It doesn't have to be on your hip. It could be on your ribs. It could be farther down the right leg. And then let that right thigh with the knee support, the ball, find where it can just relax. Okay. Right arm is reaching, it's opening. It might be lengthening up and over. Great. Now feel the connectivity of the inhale. And maybe that exhale gives you a surge of movement, expansiveness. Doesn't mean it's a really big leap, right, of range of motion, but it feels connected. You feel connected to your breath, your skin, right, because breathing connects to that largest organ all the time. Feels movement at the skin. It's a pretty big organ, isn't it? And then as you reach your right arm over, you can touch down to the block. This feels a little much for my shoulder today, so I'll go open. So it just depends, right? It could be a whole different experience one day to the next with the shoulder. It could be the time of day when you practice it. I bet if you do some of these later in the day, they can be a little bit more loosened up. Or the opposite because of your postures, your habits. So feel how you take your body into the shape. Find a few moments where you're actually relaxing your side. So that might not be with your arm up. It might be your hand down on the side, your hand across on the bolster, or onto the other arm, or on the blanket. This feels the best, just feeling it easeful. Gotta be honest with what's comfy. Good. Few moments here. Now let's work with the opposing reach of the ribs and the hips. Yeah, we generally idolize the arm and the leg to do the movement for the ribs and the hip, right? That's kind of what our go-to is. So now it's the breath and it's movement of the waist. So it might be kind of reaching back to the back of your space. And be thoughtful, or maybe it's breathful, of the movement in the mid-body to fill up that container. And letting go. Okay, so now that we've moved from a little bit of our ribs and our hips, we'll start to activate through the whole musculature, but I want you to keep aware of this centerpiece of the body of support, okay, the mid-body from the armpit, chest down to the hip. So we're going to do our cat-cow, down dog type of postures now in between these two sides, so that we'll have time to do wall. So I want to kind of work on the time management of this process. So when you come over to your hands and knees, you're rotating to the left, I think, for most of us, right? We have to turn left. Then we come around to the hands, knees, just pure and simple. Let's use our blankets as like we're going to build them up here. We're going to build up this height. Now, if you need some blanket under your knees, you just put one of them under your knees for now. If you don't want to use a blanket under your knees, just leave it on the other side. But let's add our bolster on top of the blankets. Okay, again, if you need a blanket here, put it there. It'll be fine. You don't need it to be that high. Now we reach your hands on top, whatever the height you have, and leaning back. It's not a dog pose right now. We're not trying that, but we have our hands wide on the bolster to the edges of it, still on the top. And we feel that stretch through the arms. Let your head nod a little side to side. There's plenty of room for your head here. Right? It certainly likes to drop down. Okay. Now, slide the hands off the bolster so they're right pretty much next to the space under your shoulders. And then feel when the tops of the feet rest. Feel the rounding of your back into cat pose. So the chin motions towards your chest. Inhale, arching the spine, feel the tail move back. And then continue this pattern. So it's not that different than when we are moving knees side to side, right, with the ball between. This is just the other spectrum of movement through the waist into the upper body. It's an important element of just getting into our existence, right? Being on hands, knees, crawling. It's a muscle memory. So when you come back to down dog, feel what it's like to go to that pose with the arched back, toes under. Okay, so that means my head's forward versus rounding. And then when I push the floor away and lift up my knees, then I come from that extended spine. Lower down the heels and my head relaxes between the arms. That might be the only place you feel is able to let go is your brain. But everything else has to be activated to even relate to this sensation here. So feeling, no problem with noticing feeling and sensations, but can you let the legs bend? Really feel that gravity of movement into the toes. If you look back at your knees and they're kind of starting to move closer together, purposely separate your feet. Of course, that would fix that problem, huh? And then as you keep the heels reaching down farther to the floor, push the floor away. And then walk your hands to your feet. And the forward bend is a little much for you right now. You might do your forward bend actually at the wall, but if it's easy enough to get there, the wall is fabulous for forward folds because you can get your sitting bones to the wall. You can feel the reach of the rib cage down from that seat. You're not so intensely focused on your hamstrings. It's all the bands of connection from your back leg to your sitting bones now because it's touching something. And then as your head lowers down, hold your elbows. So you're either in the middle of the room doing this pose or you're at the wall. Your brain shifts down and there's this extended factor of movement from your arms down, which gives traction to your back. Reversing the flow of gravity to the heart, to the brain. Breathing deep. Feeling gravity assist the exhalation. It's a wonderful place to focus on exhale in a forward bend. If there's one more place you're holding, it might be the brainstem, gripping up, let your head go. Right, kind of that reptilian force is kind of lifting the head to look out, so let the head go. There's always more to go for releasing the neck. Okay, let's start to come forward. So we're going to bring our weight back to the roots of the toes. So if you're at the wall, you need to come back and find your way back to your mat. Or if you're here, just start to walk out forward. But we're going to use our bolster underneath us in a moment. So I want you to scoot your feet back, bring the knees down, and turn the fingers out a little bit. Come forward down with your thighs reaching from the knee to the hip points, arching through the back. So you can feel the direction of the spine moving in. This might be a place where you notice some ease in your neck when you're in this arch. I always find it interesting because back bends are really good for that part of the body, but it's hard to agree with it for some reason. Seems like it'd be difficult. So when you come back to table, get your bolster. If you still have your blanket under your knees, leave it. Get your bolster underneath. And if it feels too close for comfort, well, use it. Use the bolster under your thighs. And then from that up dog, just within 2 seconds or so, come down to crocodile. And then forehead to the hands, or the stack of hands, your hand stack. And your hips are very immobile, right? They're just opening up at the back of the pelvis, right? This low back area. This is a good one if you want to put a sandbag on the tailbone area. That can be very soothing for the sacrum. But when our forehead is down, just trust that you're not clenching at the glutes. You just let go. Breathe. Feel how breath brings arch into the spine. Right? Inhale is a spine arch. Most of the time, it's activating in the spine. Now, as we use our arms down to push to lift our head up, feel if you can use your arms so strongly underneath you. I know some of you might have one blanket, some two, but your elbows are wide and your hands are stacked. But feel when you push down, like you would in Sphinx pose with the hands forward, but right now not possible. So you push down. So you're feeling that bracket of connection up in the back of the shoulder and the rotator cuff area, toning that area, so creating some balance. And we're going to lower down a little bit and walk the hands back next to the bolster. Lift up through that arch, spine's arch. And come back to table and then to side sage. So we turn the bolster. Keep it simple with your directional angle of the bolster. Just turning your hip down to that right hip to the bolster, the ball to the left leg, switching it up so we have this length of this left hip. Yep, I think we're getting that rhythm, leaning back. So you kind of feel like some of your poses blend into each other over and over. You know, the arching, you know, the spine that's reaching back from cat pose is like in this position, like the whole time, opposite of cat. And then add that sand if it's comfortable enough for you. If you need a block overhead, then you'll need to add that as well. And it's not required. Let's say you reach over and it's, you know, really like there's a tension ribbed up in the top of your arm, right on the front, or maybe the side, medial. If that's a pressure for you that builds with your arm overhead, I don't think you should keep pushing into it. If it feels like there's a mild amount of energy there, change, circulation, that's different if it's, you know, painful. So feel your way with the waist. That's one place you likely don't feel that you've overdone. It can always use more, right? Range of motion. Oxygenate. Feeling the stretch of the muscles between the ribs. Those are muscles, right? The intercostals are muscles. Yeah, and they're really sore, right? Unless you pulled a rib, you got a rib out. Those things can be severely difficult, but you'll know that when they're working well, it's pretty amazing. That movement of the oxygen into the lungs, it has to move through this area to absorb. So let that area move simply with inhale and exhale. And if your arm is tired, then you move it down. You take the moment. You can keep this on. My head's turned more than it needs to. So I should have my head right on the side. You know, relax through that. So feeling where the weight is in your right hip, and how that is supporting you. And that leg is folded. The right leg is in a bent, folded path. So we'll see what happens when we reach out through that right foot pretty soon. So I want you to give a few more moments of that body weight into the right side. Okay. Now we're going to come around into a seated pattern. I'm going to use the idea of the blankets though instead of the bolster today for sitting up. So what I want you to do is slide the left knee towards the right. And the sandbag, we're going to use on the left inner thigh pretty soon. We just have on the outer hip. So we're going to put on the inner thigh in a moment. So what you'll do is you'll roll into that right side. And you'll come up and move your bolster forward. And you know, if your back is a little bit in a cranky spot from being tied on one side, what I want us to do is take a blanket stack, okay? Even it out if it's kind of folded around. Make sure you're kind of in the little bit in the center of the mat. Okay, close enough. And then as you center your seat on the blanket, bring your feet together, your knees out. So you're in cobbler's pose. You don't have to put any blocks under your knees. This will be a very brief one, but we hold on to the knees. If you find this is shaking, and put a block under each leg. But get a feel of rounding the back, count, see, and inhale, arching, lifting up through the front. So the breath basically creeps up the front of the spine. And then exhale, round. This doesn't have to look like your knees are moving down at all. I want you to focus on the spine and the bones on the sides of the spine. So I'm not going to do a bigger rounding because I can feel it's a little challenging in the back. So just little bits of pulses of movement, arching and lengthening, even though it seems like it's, dropping, it's flexing the spine. But you do feel when you come up to sitting that's a pretty smart space for the back. It needs both directions to operate, but this is where you're warming towards. Okay. So let's take a positional change. We're going to bring a ball or block under the left knee. It seems like it doesn't hold my leg right now. It's barely holding. And then pull the left foot a little closer and just be mindful of how this feels in your left knee. If it feels like when you pull it, tightness is developing in the front, or on the side. That's probably your biggest fear, is the inside or the outside of the knee. So you want to make sure the left foot is maybe a little farther forward if that happens. But tilt up your bolster. If you want to put sand on this side, that's fine. Let's feel what it's like without sand, just if it is meaningful. My right leg is kind of kitty corner up towards about, it's like 1 o'clock or something on that side. And then tilt forwards. So feel the difference of inhale, spine up, and then exhale, lean forward. So there's still a bit of a spine up going. Okay, so the arms reach, the head centers between the arms. And feel if you can get the brain centered and not force the head farther down. Just maybe feel the rustle of breath movement in the back. But sometimes you're wrestling with your breath in these fuller reaches. Okay, now we're going to move the bolster so it's inside the right leg, right inside on the ground, inside. Take the left hand to that sandbag or the thigh, whatever is on that left leg, just the leg or the sandbag. And you're going to lean the right hand down on that bolster to the right, inside the right leg. And you're going to bring the left arm behind your back so you get a little bit of turn. Keep it mild here so you're not suggesting any pressure of rotating up the spine. But you can tell that the part of your spine that rotates is the thoracic, not the lumbars. They're pretty centered, holding your pelvis grounded. Okay, so feel that reach with the right hand. Turn your head to the right, so you're looking towards that bolster or that arm. And then just let your elbow soften. Now feel this work in this left side body. Now slide the left hand or the right hand, sorry, back in, and then put the bolster right in front, right forward to the left foot, and then take that right foot on top of it. We'll take a very smooth rotation. So remember from the, that thoracic. So think of anything connected to your ribs as thoracic vertebrae. Truth. Right. So we turn to the right, and where my hand is on the back is thoracic. I might have a lumbar, attached to that area, but it's not where I'm pushing. I'm not pushing at my sacrum. I want you to reach the left hand to the right leg and then create that turn. If your right leg stretches out, like it just gets lazy about the bending, you might bring your left hand a little farther down to the shin and then help out with that rotation. Okay, get the feel of turning the ribs. Breathing. It's a pretty wide twist. Feel the breath in that lower belly. Shoulders back, down through the spine. Come back forward. And let's take our right leg back behind us. Lower down the left knee to pigeon pose with the right leg back. The bolster could be this way. I find I get a little bit sloppy with my angle and my ribs if I kind of lay onto the bolster this way. So I find the elbows on the bolster across is better for my spine intelligence, but that's just from maybe getting, trying to motion into flexibility without intention and breath. So this might be helpful for you, might not. You might not want any bolster under your arms. You could go flat. If you get a pressure in your back when you have your elbows up on something, then that would be a reason to have no bolster under your back. Right, what could you do then? Well, you could put the bolster in front. What might be better if I didn't have a wall is I could have the bolster pointing towards me, and then I could put my forehead on that bolster, right? So if the bolster was the short end, would be easier. But this works too. Yeah, that's if my back feels pressure from the arch. Okay, now the right leg is relaxed. Well, I feel some awareness, but its toes relaxed. Okay, now with the left knee pointed open, pigeon pose, you're going to get a feel of your back reaching behind you and walk the hands in and get a feel when you push and you lengthen into that arched lift of the spine. Okay, keep it simple. This is kind of an unusual pose in some of the placements of the hip. So when we come back center, we're taking cobbler's pose, right in between the two, kind of how we started to get into this one on that other side. So feet together, knees out. And you might try the blocks under the legs, just to give something to compare it to. So mine are pretty low. I'm actually going to bring them higher to see if this is even cozier on the back. Around the back, and arch through the spine. Yeah, I suppose it's arching the back versus spine itself. So touch into that rounding, flexing, and extension of the spine. And if it feels like there's parts of the back that are kind of falsely, motioning, they're not quite with the system, it's probably going to be neck and behind that space. And let your head really feel some movement with your body. It's challenging because we kind of orient our head with like our vision where we're looking most of the time. So that's always where we go. So try to let your eyes maybe close and feel these alternating cat-cow motions, seated cat-cow. Okay, now once you find that you're up, so the spine is tall, then take the left leg straight out. And then bend that right, well, the right leg is bending. And then the block will work too under the right leg. Reach that bolster. Now, I know we've had this angle with our back a bit, so I don't want to overdo it. I like to keep it minimal, grounded pattern. So we're going to take a moment, like 15 seconds at the most, to tilt forward so you can kind of warm up the shoulder for the momentum in the back. So we get a few moments of that. The right knee could have the sandbag on the inner thigh, no problem. If you want to add sand, just do it on the second side. Maybe you already did it on the first side. It's nice and grounding. Put the bolster on the inside of that left leg. Slide the right foot in if it goes. Get the ball under the knee. I think the ball is important, or a block. So this is a pretty big core reach. So we have the left hand on the bolster. We're sliding that hand down. It doesn't mean you're going to go down to your elbow. Okay, it might not happen at all. And you're turning the waist to the right arm behind the back. So feeling, and be really small with the movement deepening. So there's a deepening arch to the back. Feel the leaning perspective. Feel the arch to the spine. Breathe. Now this is a pretty interesting setup for our rotation. So you'll feel this right side of the back, the side beam, right? It's even layered in the back musculature, right? The QL right here is what it's called. Okay, so when you feel yourself moving up to sitting, moving the bolster in front and putting your left foot on top, this QL area, I'm going to keep my knuckles on, right? It was just lengthening this way. So you had this lateral motion of the side working. Now you're prim and proper up, right? So feel that lift, feel the natural arch. We want to keep our natural three primary curves in our spine. And when you reach the left hand back and the right hand to the left knee, maybe you need a block under your left hand. actually think that's necessary for me on this side. So when you turn, feel where that right hand holds onto that left knee or below the knee. And notice what rotates out of that right side of the waist that you were just connected to in the side stretch. Maybe it's minimal, maybe it's just, oh yeah, that was the lead into this. Okay, so feel that rotation. Yeah, there's always further to go, of course. So acceptance is essential here. How far it goes that you can feel the shoulders down, the chest forwards. Right, the breath creeps up the front of the spine. Nice. Notice what latches into the shoulders. When the right hand holds, probably feels like it's a bit locked. There's a little sensation of locked. So if you have a block behind you, slide it away and then turn back forward. I suggest you just keep it simple. You move the sand and then you move the ball away. The right leg adjusts a little forward. And this is kind of a leap, right? The leg is up. It's not leaping, but it's lifted. And then that left leg goes back. So now this right leg has something stuck inside. So I'm going to turn that bolster. And you could have it like this and lay down on the bolster. Make sure the back knee is comfortable. You need to slide your blanket back so it holds the top of that thigh. So the nice thing about and coming to your pigeon pose, just going to give a review of what happens to the thigh. So when we were here, you don't need to come back to this. We have that kind of flush. So it's inner, turning, open. And then just like massage, I mean, it doesn't feel like a massage exactly, but when you come back, the muscles are working that way though, right? So I'm trying to get all these muscles to get kind of loose and loosen. So when I come back, that thigh rolls in. And then I put my weight into my hands and recenter. So I'm actually trying to get the top of my back thigh on that blanket and slide it. So it really feels like the tissue on the front of that thigh is I'm pressing across it to make an impact there and open that up. Yeah, it's kind of interesting, like any up dog pattern would be. Coming down to the arms again, down either to the elbows on the floor or the bolster, the spine. Motion like an umbrella on the back area. So just feeling that reach through the back. Now, if it's pretty intense into your hip, you obviously can use the blanket to bring more height under that right seat. You can also stuff a ball. These are great for this. Right under your right rear. You can shift forward and then sit to that ball. It can be surprisingly helpful. Never underestimate that power of the little spiky massage ball. Okay. Now I'm laying off the idea of bringing the back knee to the foot towards your rear because we're going to cross this left leg next. All right, so everything, it's a very sequential sequencing. I know everything has a pattern to the next, cumulative effects. So now, if you're near a wall or not, I mean, some of you may already be placed near what you're going to use for the wall work, but when you come out of this one, we're going to lean to that right side, and then this time we're coming forward, but no cobbler. We'll take our bolster to the right. use the wall right away after this one, but the next pose we will. So if you're near the wall space, you can set up for this near the wall or be right where you're at, and we'll get to that wall in a moment. But slide off the blanket. So what I'm saying is you can be near the wall or not. No blanket stack, just one blanket behind you. And then slide to the back. You might need to do a few resetting of things, right? Getting your spine down, maybe you roll down, maybe you kind of crawl down to your back. And when you do arrive so that your knees are in this pointed, lifted position, the knees point up. And so they're already kind of setting themselves. If the feet are fairly close, not only as close as your knees will be okay with it, towards your buttocks, you can actually feel that back tilt. So I want you to stay with a minor tilt. It's a very small degree. Nothing can slide under your back with this tilt. You know, barely a spider. Okay. So stretch down that right leg, not forcing into a wall, but it might be near a wall. And then cross the left leg to the bolster. And this is a reaching hip, right? So we want to feel that that left thigh reaches over. I think stuffing a ball to the sacrum stuffer is good for this. It's a nice anchor for the pelvis. It's maybe not exactly at that point. We're all a little unique on how we'll place that. Sand or no sand on the outer left leg, up to you. If you like the sand, but you're not a fan of the intensity, you can have the sand closer to your hip. If you have it farther down the leg to the knee, it will likely be more stretch. So open the left arm. We did something similar to this in the early part of the session. And so we're kind of following into it. Okay, we're going to do a brief crossover because we got a little bit to do for inversion here ahead. So brief crossovers. So feel where that left arm is open. If your head is rolled to the left, if it's right in the center, that's fine. Okay, and let the spine feel its natural arches. 3 curves. And 3 curves means the 3 different segments of the vertebrae. So if you go, well, there's rounding and well, there's only 2 in your mind's awareness, but there's 3 primary curves. Now, if you're able to source out the sand support, it is important you feel this outer left leg here. If you massage it a little bit, you want to get some blood flow in there, some good circulation dialed around the hip. And sometimes stillness is therapeutic as well. See how it flows. Okay. Now we're going to switch sides and let's try to keep it really smooth change. But you do have to change your props over. So maybe start with a ball, removal, sand. Feel what it's like with that leg crossed over to the right. Just notice how high in your back you got with the crossover. This is important for bridge post today. How high up in your back does your thoracic rotate? Some of us, it's below the shoulder blades. That's generally where we seem to be stopping. So come back in center, and we're trying to get more range of motion generally. And then take that bolster to the left side. But in reason where you feel like, oh, I got some good range of motion, I feel, circulation is happening. That's what all you're really aiming towards personally. Left leg straight down, right leg crosses to the bolster. Add a ball. And I would think about that sand. I mean, not required. If you open the arm out and you find that you're comfortable without it, don't add it if it's adding clutter to your experience. It's a little bit of sand might be okay. The left foot on the bottom might turn more on one side than the other. Imagine it's pretty different. You're trying to get some symmetry in general. So noticing what your habits, we even have pose habits, pose postures that we've all taken on. So open out the right arm and turn your head to the right. Feel the back of the head be the rotator over through the neck. So feel where the shoulder is rotating around and in towards the spine. And if you don't have a visualization that it's like these pieces of the shoulder, like skeletal, I think it's helpful to have some of that in your minds. The skeletal rotation. And the muscles are what are have all the hydrating and the blood and the fluids that help you turn. A clunky skeleton wouldn't do that, but it's all the innervated tissue that is willing to rotate. And then it's helpful for the lungs. So then the organs benefit, the heart, the digestive tract. Guess I should remember to do this practice often. Well, here we are with it. So breathing slow. Empty the lungs. So simply scan where the arch moves into your back. Now just notice it's high up at the back of the shoulder blade on this side. Is it a little lower? Do you feel the lungs are a little tapped into with twisting when you take a long breath? Okay, probably both parts of the breath are challenged with a twist. So now we're going to let gravity kind of assist that exhalation process. So move the ball, sand. Now get to a wall space, and you're going to basically just need your bolster nearby. You're going to want to have a block. Bring your blanket with you anyway, so if you need to roll and get to the wall, or maybe you're scooting around. But you're going to take the bolsters on the side. I'm going to start with the blanket under my head, but I know that I'll likely be comfortable without it, but we just don't know till it's a different time of day. Nighttime is a different practice time for your circulation. So you're going to have a block, and then I recommend that it's normal we have blocks, right? Not the ball. That's just not as normal that we would in practice. So this group, we're just going to use the ball because it's a more functional practice with the ball, because you can actually squeeze it, right? So place your feet at the wall, up at the wall. So the nice thing about this wall space is I get pretty close, okay? But this will be interesting. So I'll demo first. You're going to push into the wall, right? So I'm not necessarily pushing into the ball, but I have a necessary assignment to hold it a little bit. And I know it's there. I'm going to probably naturally my muscles attract into that ball. So when I lift up, I want you to go slow so you really feel your heels at the wall, and you're lifting and you're massaging into the back. So I want you simply to spend the time lifting and lowering, so it's tiny. It's not a big lift up, just to massage the back. So the areas that you're just twisting, right? You're massaging those areas. It's really small, lifting. And it kind of feels like your belly is kind of dropping a little bit when you lift up, because you're really working through the spine. But take some time to do this. It could be even smaller lifts than I'm doing. Might be very subtle for you. Okay. And then when you're feeling like, oh, I'm going to go up a little higher, you might find, oh, this blanket, it's pushing in my neck. So it might be something you get rid of. If the floor is too hard, then you might have just a little bit of your blanket, right? Just a smaller amount, so it's not comfortable for your head pushing on a harder surface. Okay. Now, as I lift up this time, I'm going to get a block and I want to put that under my sacrum. And I tend to put my block where I feel kind of tailbone-ish area, pelvis. I don't necessarily want to go very high. Now, one thing that affects your lungs a bit, just getting this direction. One thing some of you might find you can do is get the block all the way up to the towel. And that's obviously a goal. Having your feet at the wall this high is going to make it happen. When your feet are on the ground and you try to do it like this, and you try to get your hips up, it's really difficult. So this is how we're going to start with it. So you got your block. If you're going to go a little higher, remember your neck. You might not want your blanket too bulky. So then I'm going to get that block so it's to my sacrum, it's a little higher. Now, some of you might pass on this idea this high. Some might go for it. Either way, you choose. Now, as you have that lift, if you don't want to keep the ball, that's okay. You can let it just drop away and roll somewhere else. But you're reaching your arms towards the wall and you're rolling the shoulders down and in. So door number one is this, simply, right? It's pretty close to your shoulder stand. Now, door number two, there's going to be three, is you could hold the block. I don't want your block to fall away or to tip down. And you can see what it feels like to get your legs to lift. Now, this might be the time you get rid of your ball. Try not to roll your head off or side to side. Just let your head be centered. So you can keep the ball or just let it drop or carefully move it. So as long as your block is stable, you could then move the arms back down. Right? So the palms are open. Shoulders, they try to tuck under, don't they? Okay. Third option, full bridge, right? You bring your feet down, not on the wall, but on the floor. And then you're in a really nice high bridge. Hybrid bridge. Yeah, this is great. I love this version for my hip flexors to really get those to open up. Again, you could try the legs up or have the feet at the wall. This is fine too, but stay with this. So take a version that works for you. If your feet down is surprisingly okay, like, oh, I got this. Then the efforting is to almost to let go a little bit and just let the block support you. Feel where the front of the hip bones opens, where the spine doesn't need to have that much lift at the head, right? So it should be really minor under your head. Breathing, upper lungs. This one might sap your hydration, right? It does do a little bit of a kidney workout, and those they work so much, right? They're the primary busy organs, so busy all day. So just noticing how that feels circulation wise for you. Okay. So we have this hip lift. So what I'm going to give an option for those of you that are okay doing one more inversion pattern, we're going to take a few moments here. If you decide you want to stay with your legs maybe up the wall this way for your final inversion, you could be here. You don't have to get your bolster out to be with this. It's not quite straight up, but you could work with this here. Okay. Those that want to come down and change up their props, bring your feet either down to the floor. I think for me, it's a lot easier to have my feet on the wall. I just want simply ease in my back. So I'm going to push into my feet, push really firm into the wall, and then slide the block out and lower the spine down. Easeful back. Okay, one last inversion. The back might feel, a lot of going. But keep in mind, you don't want to squeeze the knees into the chest yet, because we don't want to shock the sacrum. It's working a bit to keep your shoulders and your ribs open, right? So I'm going to slide my bolster over down to the wall so it's horizontal across. And then I'm going to roll carefully so I still have my back arch. Take my blanket in, got my sandbag nearby, and then swing the legs up the wall. Okay, so I just keep on keeping on here with my inversion. And then I add my sand to my feet. I know some of you might find a different variation of legs up. Maybe you like to be away from the wall with your sand on your feet, maybe not. So no requirement to have a wall there for your last pose, but as you're deciding and factoring in the bolster under your pelvis, feel where you can let the pelvis relax, and that inverted assistance with your breathing formula, like the diaphragmatic breath, belly softens, arms open. That's essential here, that we are not working with the arms down anymore. The arms are out, cactus or otherwise. And then with that wisdom internally, lengthening the inhale, and then surrendering on the exhale, returning the body into a full restore mode. Okay, so find a few moments here where the spine has a elongation due to the lift of the pelvis. Absorbing the awareness, but also the benefits from practice, but maybe focus on the awareness. And then feeling the abdomen dome. So knowing the diaphragm is working well upside down, if the abdomen is able to move comfortably with the in and out breath. So if your feet are feeling a lot of flex, that will be loosened up here. So awareness maybe is mild with the eye stream, but you can let your eyes stay a little dim if you like. Move your feet away from the wall. And kind of feel that spirit of movement in the back muscles. Even the place from the pelvis to the shoulders has to activate to get your legs off the wall. And the key would be to let the heart be centered and calm. And as you bend your knees, of course, this will be really nice for the back. So we are taking the sand away, and then the knees are bending in towards the chest, and it still has a little bit of natural curve through the spine because of the bolster. So feel the knees drawing in, and then take your time. When you do roll out, I want you to focus on how the back muscles are kind of unwrapping themselves when you roll out of that rounded shape, and then you come up and take a lift through the hips underneath your seat. Maybe it's a small blanket push up, but find where the back muscles are lifting, and let your hands rise up to the heart. Take a moment here together collectively, acknowledging your practice and each other's practice. Inhale and exhale, bowing into the space behind your heart. Namaste.